Yeah, when I was reading this chapter and I was rereading it before the
Mhm.
community call, and when we were talking, and yeah, it's a whole of that, like maybe when we blame others of doing something, or we blame them for how we feel. Yeah, we're not being responsible of the the capacity we have to manage ourselves. So, well, this chapter is about taking responsibility for our feelings, and it starts saying that we can have four options when we receive a negative message, and that what others say may be the stimulus, but never the cause of our feelings.
Mhm.
So our feelings is the result of how we choose to receive what others say and do, and yeah, we should be responsible for what we do to generate our own feelings. And yeah, he says that there are four options when to behave when someone gives us a negative message, and the first one is blaming ourselves. So is to feel guilt or shame about others' feelings, or yeah, about other feelings, and yeah, letting others um like get to us. The other way is blaming others, and um is when you judge the other, and when we are angry because of we think that the actions of the others are the ones that produce our feelings. So as we give that responsibility to the other, we feel angry about with the other, because of putting ourselves in the position of not being responsible for them, and yeah, blaming the other. That he then says that the third way is sensing our own feelings and needs. And when I was reading it, yeah, I really related to this one because it's something that I try to do, and we become conscious that our current feelings derive from a need, and we yeah, um, we we try to sense our own feelings and needs, but what really was challenging for me was the no, point number four, and when he said of sensing others' feelings and needs, and it's the most challenging because yeah, sometimes we are aware of our own feelings and needs, but we are not aware of the other. And and he says that the fourth way is also sensing the other feelings and needs, and in that way we accept responsibility rather than blame other people for our feelings. So yeah, I think that I, at least I still need to improve a little bit in this point number four, because yeah, sometimes for me it's really easy to understand why am I in my position, but yeah, the most difficult and challenging part is when we try to understand why the other person is feeling, or what are the needs that are driving the other person.
Yeah, I think this is a thing that underlies a lot of the, that which you've extended to yourself, uh, you can do other people, right? And I think it's wise that he actually puts this at the end, because by going through the first three steps, you kind of develop a library of understanding of, okay, my feelings in this and in this situation, and then kind of can, it becomes less onerous to develop a mode of extending that feeling and need awareness to other people when you've been practicing it yourself, right? And so it's not at all unusual or even unnatural to think about each one of these steps as a kind of building blocks, So the more you sense your feelings and needs, then the more you develop your understanding, and then the amount of time that it takes to connect to another person's feeling and needs short as you yourself have more and more experiences that match up with other people.
He then gives two examples of how can we um, express disappointment. And in the first one, in A, we see that the speaker attributes the responsibility of disappointment on the other person, and in B, that the feelings of disappointment is traced to the speaker's own desire that was not being fulfilled. So it's you disappointed me by not coming over last meeting, and I was disappointed when you didn't come over because I wanted to talk over some things that were bothering me. He then gives another example, and I like that he says like I, because I, and not to say like because you, and that's something that he like tips in the chapter. He says like I because I feel because I, and not like I feel because you, and that's a common mistake that we make to avoid the responsibility of our feelings.
Yeah, it's really, I feel like this is almost the absolute cornerstone, you know. Um, that's my feeling about it anyway. By the way, what did you think of what I said earlier?
Yeah, I totally agree. And even though that I feel that there are like steps, I
Mm-hmm.
also try to see them like as we are going all over them in different situations. Like sometimes it would be easier for you to sense others and feeling and their needs of others, um, and because sometimes it's easier to relate to people whom we don't have so much like history with, and maybe when you have a certain history of maybe abusive behavior to um, regarding someone, or that someone has done you this, sometimes that would be make it more difficult for you to sense the other feelings and needs, um, even though that you can do it for some people. So yeah, I think that it's not like stages like I'm on one, then two, then three, and or four, and more than there are like ways of reacting, and each time we receive a message, we can choose one of the four.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I just saw them as kind of continuum, say, you know, because if you're reacting of, say, number two, right? I mean, every situation is different, but I just don't think in general we're this kind of emotional, legislative literacy. You know what I mean? That's why I like this work, is because it feels like it is a kind of, literacy of this stuff, as opposed to some kind of commandment.
Well, yeah. Yeah, we also, what I think when I read this is that there are so much cultural differences, um, and
Oh, really?
yeah, so much things that we normalize, like um, people in Colombia say that the people from my town speak like giving orders,
Right.
but but like it's just something that we have normalized in our culture,
Sure.
and yeah, we talk all the time with like very bad words, and we don't say to the other like, hey, would you please do me a favor of, I don't know, getting
Right.
me that. We tell the other like, hey, get me that. But it's
Yeah.
just like the way that we are culturally like used to that. So
Mm-hmm.
in my interpretation of NVC, I see all this as a framework and not like an exact um,
Sure.
yeah, thing. And I understand, the way I understand it, it's not like just the way that you can phrase something, but also like the intention that is behind it. So maybe
Mm-hmm.
like someone, one of my friends would tell me like, hey, get me that. But I understand the words that he say, and if I would be like too literal, I would under think that he's not being like that he's giving me like an order or something.
Mm-hmm.
But like processing through the signal, I really understand that he's like asking me for a favor. So yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's not just exactly like the words that follow one another, but also on the context that they are being said.
Yeah. Well, and I do notice, like when I was in Italy, for example, um, what you're saying is so true, because if you go to Italy, like the example that I always use about Italy is that in Italy, nobody there thinks that the kitchen is a part of the house. So if you buy a house, you can expect to go in there and there will be no kitchen. There'll be no cabinets. There's no sink. There's no anything. There's just a blank kitchen with like hookups for electricity and stuff. But it's not. They expect that like the kitchen is such a personal thing that it's so incredibly personal to people in Italy that it would be almost rude to think that someone would move in and have a kitchen there. You know what I mean? So it's really interesting. So like when I asked them about that, I thought it was crazy, and so they were like, why would you put a kitchen in a house when you buy it? You have to make the kitchen your own, you know? And it's, yeah, so I hear what you're saying. Um,
Yeah, and I don't know, that's something about the Latin culture. Yeah, that I feel that we are um, reproducing this violent communication, but in a very unconscious way, and maybe we are treating our friends, and we are like, yeah, we have a good relationship with someone, but um, we are having some like type of strong wording with him or her.
Mm, mhm. Well, the other example that I'd use for this is that I remember my first wife. She was, well, I mean, there's just a lot of violent communicators in the world, from my perspective, and um, so she actually thought that I should be jealous when she was like, when someone else was flirting with her, for example, and I wasn't. So it made her mad, right? And so for her, jealousy, displaying jealousy, was a sign that I cared, when in fact for me it would be a corrosive, negative kind of a situation, right? So the question for me was always, response is healthy. Do you know what I mean? And so it's interesting because Krishnamurti said that to be well adapted to a sick society is not a measure of health, and I think that's true. So I think this also helps us to more objectively sort of gauge our cultural reference points too.
Yeah, and it makes like a lot of reflection, because yeah, I talk, and here when I speak, when I hear other people speaking, I hear like so much violence, but even in relationships when they're expressing love. So it's also like surprising how hard it is for us to like not um talk violently, and how violence is so deeply rooted in the way we communicate.
Yeah, it is amazing.
Okay, and then he moves to saying that the basic mechanism of motivating by guilt is to attribute the responsibility for one's our feelings to others. So yeah, if we attribute the responsibility for our feelings to other, we are making that other person feel guilty for our behavior. And he talks in this about children, and I think this is something we all have somehow experienced in our life, and is the fear of like doing or not doing something because someone said us that that would have a big impact on them. And like yeah, I remember when I was a kid, trying to be one of the top of my class, because my parent told me like, hey, I feel sad if you lose any subject in the school. And I was like, hey, I don't want my parents sad, and not because of the motivation of learning.
Yeah, that's an extrinsic motivation, right? And that's kind of unethical way, right, to do that. So he says it that way, but when we talk about it from a token engineering commons standpoint, let's say, we're often talking about, intrinsic versus extrinsic motivations. This actually has a direct relationship to that as well.
Yeah, and it's a common mistake we do. And he then gives some tips, like what I was mentioning before, like I feel because I, and not like I feel because you. Yeah, we feel because we want to and feel something, and not because like other wants us to feel something. And this relates me to the book that is called like Man's Search for Meaning, for by Viktor Frankl, that he says like,
Mm.
no matter what others can do to punish you, you are the owner, and you're the only one who can produce the feelings you feel. So even if others are trying to torture you, you can always have that last word on what is that reaction that you produce to that action. Yeah, I really liked this chapter. And then he goes to talk about the needs at the roots of feelings. And this is something that we have talked in several times, like judgments of others are alienated expressions of our own unmet needs. So maybe, yeah, this guy that we were talking about, um, that crashed into a class and started like criticizing. He has this unmet needs of maybe recognition of
Mm-hmm.
compassion that gets reflected by not being compassionate with others.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, and
yeah.
all we really tried to do was ask him questions and stuff. And he just, I don't know, it's really interesting because he was talking about how he was so far above to deal with people who were manipulating and other stuff, but he was very blatant in his own manipulation of things. And so it was just a really interesting
Yeah,
kind of thing. Like,
that's the difficulty of being so sure. When you are really sure about something, it's very possible that you are biased. And
yep.
yeah, that's why Socrates was the most clever man of all, when he said like, what I know is that I don't know anything. and
Hmm.
and yeah, that took him away, that bias of being certain about something.
And
So
people often misunderstand that, you know, that they kind of extrapolate and say like, the more I know, the more I don't. It's that's an expression of the thing that you discover should create kind of an awe inside you, that such that it also creates a humility, right? And so that's a very smart thing you just said now. And yeah, so that's actually the reason why I said to you that I'd be really interested in, and I actually put this in to our spiral dynamics and integral group to say, hey, how about we actually take a look at what this guy was saying? Because, here we are all trying to do all this great work and this and that. And then some random guy shows up and says, yeah, you guys all suck. And, you know, and so we're like, okay, it's like, all right, so that's interesting. But so let's take that on, maybe instead of shying away from it, why don't we just lean into it a little bit more and just say, okay, so, maybe there are some shadow things we're not handling here, or there's a thing in liberating structures where you specifically do that as a method, you know, where you say, okay, I'm just going to assume that nonviolent communication is actually psychic terrorism, right? So if you consider that perspective, then it gives you a more complete understanding about what it is that's going on, and so that actually suits this chapter very well.
yeah. And he also then talks about the importance of expressing our needs, and that sometimes we expect others to understand our needs without saying them, and that there's a lot of cultural ideas that try to um, uh, there's a lot of cultural ideas that try to teach us of not expressing our feelings, but he says that it's actually really important to express our feelings and our needs, because no one is like a mind reader to know what we are thinking, and that's why we can express ourselves. But I think that what I am talking about, it's a little bit yeah, it's here when he says that yeah, we sometimes feel judged by revealing our needs, and we feel frightened by it, like if it
Yeah.
like, yeah, if being vulnerable would have been something wrong or something.
Well, and that's actually, you can take a look in this first four things we were talking about earlier in the chapter, right? It was like if you parse it out, right, this idea of I feel because I makes you vulnerable, because I is the thing that makes you vulnerable. And when you live in a consistently sort of violent sort of setup that talking became regarding and structured and environment, then you will tend to develop euphemisms for things, which actually create a lot of clarity, behind everyone. So if you can go up a little bit and go back to those four things we were talking about earlier.
The first steps of
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, I feel because I, right? So if I'm like, if the person says, when I hear you saying I'm the most self-centered person you've ever met, I feel because you were just there. Sorry, I don't know.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying is to say, I feel, you're dismissing me versus I feel because I have a need for, you know, recognition. That is a thing that makes you vulnerable. And so I think not only are we taught to communicate violently, but I think we unconsciously truncate our own agency in terms of that, so that we don't have to feel vulnerable, right? So it's not necessarily so much that the culture sort of teaches us to do that, but it teaches us that we'll be punished for being vulnerable oftentimes, and so we will do that in a bunch of different unconscious ways. So it's not just about saying I feel because it's also just about recognizing various ways in which the culture around you might uh, advocate for some other position, other than autonomy and agency that you have a birthright to. So
Yeah.
I like it because it's consistent through the chapter. You can tell that they did a good job in thinking about all those things.
And I really like, this is something that I really like about NVC. The fact that he says that we all share some basic human needs. Yeah, it may, like, we all breathe, we all eat, we all have caring needs, we all have been babies, we all have had uncertainty about economic things, and I think this is something that is a key for conflict resolution, the ability
Mm-hmm.
of understanding that we all have the same needs, because when you understand that the other did something because of hunger, you can relate to that behavior, and maybe you can be more compassionate, or you can say like, I would have done the same. And yeah, when someone is expressing an unmet need, so like, that immediately gives us yeah, the understanding of and relevance to the point of view of the other. Like, if we think that the other doesn't have the same needs than I, um, yeah, it would be so difficult to relate or to feel compassion to one another.
Hmm.
So yeah, like integrity, autonomy, celebration, interdependence, spiritual communion, physical nurturance, play. Like, yeah, we all share these needs, and sometimes if we only stay by what are the feelings that are expressed by the other, we can only think that, yeah, that the other is feeling something because they want to. But when we also are able to see and to see the needs behind their expression, we can, yeah, we can place ourselves in that situation, and really understand and do something, um yeah, if there is a request.
So just FYI, I need to go in about 5 minutes.
Yeah, we are about to wrap the chapter. We already talked about this, the pain of expressing our needs versus the pain of not expressing our needs, and that
Mhm.
sometimes it can be frightening, but like expressing vulnerability is something that breaks the ice, and that may let us like place ourselves in the same um, stage than the other, so it promotes like it promotes equality. And yeah, and if we don't value our needs, others may not either. Like if we let people to step over us, like yeah, they are going to do it because they are not knowing that don't want others to step on us. And sometimes that happens to people that is very socially like minded, they let themselves to be bullied or to be yeah, judged, or to be seen as fools. But
Mhm.
yeah, if you don't express your needs, others won't do them, or won't take them into account. So that also states that if you want others to take you seriously, you have to take you seriously yourself.
Mm.
And this is one of the parts that called my attention most about the book, about the chapter, that from emotional slavery to emotional liberation. He says that there are three stages of how can we liberate from these emotional um, carries. And like in the first step, yeah, we believe ourselves responsible for the feelings of others. And this is something, as we spoke before, like when we do something um, because we don't want the other to feel certain X or Y reaction. But here we are not giving from the heart, but by giving out of guilt. And yeah, the second stage is when we become aware of the high cost of assuming responsibility for others' feelings and trying to accommodate them at our own expense. He here has like a funny story, like yeah, to
Yeah,
come,
with the son expressing himself obnoxious.
yeah, in the obnoxious stage, and you say like that's your problem, and you don't really like to considerate the other feelings or the other needs.
Yeah.
And and
That was another thing that this guy was doing.
yeah, and then
And
she like her daughter
yeah.
was being like bothered by yeah, but by the school principal, and she told her like, hey, fuck off. and and even though like some people would say like yeah, she did something wrong, like he congratulated her because she had become independent of what the other feeling, the other like the other attribution of the feelings to us.
Mhm.
But then there's the third stage that is emotional liberation, where we respond to the needs of others out of compassion. And yeah, we don't want to have our to get what we want by stepping out of other. So we accept full responsibility for our own intentions and actions, but not for the feelings of others. So yeah, maybe you can buy a cake for a birthday present, and maybe the other person didn't like it, but you did it with the best intention. So that way, yeah, you can be relieved out of the way like others react to the way you behaved.
Mhm.
And we are aware that we can never meet our own needs at the expense of others. Emotional liberation involves stating clearly what we need in a way that communicates we are all equally concerned that the ends of others be fulfilled, that the needs of others be fulfilled. So yeah, we don't want to step out of the other, because we understand that the other needs need to be fulfilled too, and that's the way we can also fulfill our needs, and communicate like with seeing the other as an equal. And
Mhm.
yeah, and this is
Okay,
the summary
I
of the
need to go.
call.
I'm sorry, I'm rushing that, but
No,
I
that
kept thinking it was earlier.
yeah, that's the end of the
I need
chapter,
to go.
and the
Yeah,
summary
thank
just
you.
basically says the same that we just said
Yeah,
and we
yeah.
went over. So thank you, Durgas, for coming, and yeah,
Thank you.
I'll hope that we can be joined by more people next week.
Great. We'll see
Thanks.
you.
Thanks, man.